I draw on a lot of different practices, and my, if you like, palette of approaches and what I'm open to with a client is really large, diverse, and open. And I'm very instinctive in the way that I go to those things in a session. For example, because of this mental health stuff, and the point that we actually talk about this type of therapy as a talk therapy. You know what happens when we are in talk therapy is we're constantly speaking, and the client comes thinking they need to speak the whole time. And also they're drawing on their mind the whole time, because when you're involved in telling a story or trying to analyze or name certain things in your experience, you're in your mind. A lot of you have to be in your mind. And so we become quite locked into this, and we cannot approach the deeper things, the deeper dimensions of life and experience just through the mind. And so the types of things that I do is do some of what today is called somatic. If you like, scientifically, it's called somatic healing, somatic therapy, which is letting the body speak. And sometimes we put the laptop, or my clients will get up from the chair and we do something physical where they might lie down on the floor. They might sit down and we stop talking, and we could do guided visualizations that I lead depending on the situation. Sometimes we're just in breathing, and I will guide sort of different exercises through breathing to try to get out of the mind and try to tap into the other sides of their experience. For example, a lot of the work is energetic sometimes, to get out, even for people to themselves get out of their mind, so they can allow for their feelings to be expressed, or so they can see how a certain experience or trauma has been stored in their nervous system. A lot of it is to do with posture, with feeling gravity, you know. So I draw on a lot of these things. So through the body, but there's also through, you know, parts work, which I think you and I have spoken about before. Parts work is really, it's really a process where we involve the abstract mind. So there's a lot of imagination in it, but also it's an energetic work. So where I slowly, generally starts after quite a few sessions, where I start to observe the different energies that are present within the client and the types of conflicts that they're holding within themselves. And the different tendencies, the conflicting narratives, and all those kinds of things. And we try to personalize them. So we start to extract them and say, okay, this energy could be, you know, a sort of aggressive energy, let's say, you know, something that's very much, you know, generally embodies anger, rage, and behaves a certain way in their life. Another energy is of a very young, helpless child. Another energy can be about, you know, the savior, the hero. So we start to personalize these characters. We can give them names and all of that, and we start to work with them. And it's very, very energetic work. We get them to talk to one another. Eventually, we might spend a while with two of them. This is, again, something that's completely different from, you know, sitting on a chair and speaking. It's very, very different. It's very powerful. You know, it becomes, yeah, it's a very different way of working. So there's the body, there's the energetics, there's also the imagination. Hmm? I often prepare my clients to the fact that we will be drawing on our imagination to be able to envision things in the future, to be able to connect to the past, to be able to animate and recognize some of the energies within us and the narratives. We do need to apply our imagination. It's very, very powerful and very helpful. So that, again, is the mind, but it's not the concrete mind and rationality. It's what we use for art, you know, it's what we use for dreaming. It's the abstract mind, the world of symbols, of archetypes. It's hugely, hugely powerful when it comes to going deep and doing this deep psychological work. You know, I teach people to sort of support themselves in very small ways, you know, because they come wanting to change their lives and they look for big gestures. And often this seems actually inaccessible and very overwhelming. And so I tend to say, let's go small. Let's go small, small, small. Start to do little, little things intentionally, like getting yourself a little cup of tea, lighting a candle, perhaps, just deciding to withdraw yourself from a situation. Just do that for you. You know, those little things can be huge steps, you know, in the longer run, to start to look after yourself and know your boundaries, amongst other things. So yeah, it's very, very multifaceted. But indeed, there are a lot of resources. The last thing I'll say about that, because I know I spoke about boundaries earlier, is this idea of connection. You know, which is very common in sort of Middle Eastern cultures, let's say. connection, community, friends, neighbors, family. It's huge. The community is absolutely, it's almost imperative. You cannot live isolated in those cultures. It's absolutely part of who you are. And that actually helps. And there's another conflict between Eastern, if you like, culture and the Western mental health approach, where you're like setting boundaries and becoming more self-reliant and reparenting yourself. And, look after yourself, learn to look after yourself, and then you have your own back and you're done. And almost sometimes it can feel like a very isolating process, through healing, let's say. Oh, so I'm going to end up, okay, basically disconnecting from very important people in my life. And then I'm just independent and I'm good. Actually, no, that's not the idea. That's not healthy, because we are intrinsically social people. We need each other. It's inbuilt. The human beings are social beings. There's no way around it. And so when we are working with cultures, especially where that is particularly important, we cannot ask them to cut those ties necessarily. They might choose to cut some, but community can be wonderful and is wonderful. And for cultures that define themselves through it, they're imperative. And so how can they keep that, but maybe become a bit more discerning in terms of what's nourishing and what isn't for them within the community, for example?